We are the Guinea Pig Collective. All will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
Searching for old treasures, blowing off the dust. Timeless stories and legendary characters. This is Talking Movies. Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another Talking Movies. So, following on the heels of the earlier videos in this week where I did Buck Rogers and we were talking about space fantasy, we are going to continue that theme today, as well as also following on a video that I did from last week. So let's get into it. Written by Ronnie Graham, Thomas Meehan, and Mel Brooks, and directed by Mel Brooks, 1987's Spaceballs, starring Mel Brooks as President Scroob and Yogurt, John Candy as Barf, Rick Moranis as Dark Helmet, Bill Pullman as Lone Star, Daphne Zuniga as Princess Vespa, Dick Van Patten as King Roland, George Weiner as Colonel Sanders, Michael Winslow as the radar technician, Joan Rivers as Dot Matrix, her voice only of course, Lorene Yarnold Jansen as Dot Matrix, John Hurt as John Hurt, and as always the rest of the cast and crew that actually rounded out the rest of this film. Now, of course, if you had seen last week's History of the World Part 1 by Mel Brooks, you would have understood exactly where I was going with this, since History of the World Part 1 ended with Jews in space. And of course, that wound up being the prelude for Mel Brooks to wind up creating Spaceballs. Following the success of the Star Wars movie in 1977, which, by the way, had a very limited amount of appearances in movie theaters around the country. Some people might have you believe that they seen this and that it was everywhere. It was not. You can easily look up the number of theaters that Star Wars was originally released in, and it wasn't very many to begin with. Despite that fact, Star Wars overperformed and wound up being re-released in 1978 to a much wider theatrical base, and of course did so well that it spawned 2 sequels. This was not lost on Mel Brooks, who seen the way of the sci-fi rise and decided that he wanted to be part of that. And what was he going to do? He was going to spoof the greatest of those sci-fi franchises, and of course it was going to be Star Wars. Now, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi had already followed up as sequels to the original Star Wars and had done very well. Mel Brooks wound up incorporating elements of all 3 of those movies into Spaceballs. So, with that out of the way, now we can get down to the plot. Let's get down to what the story of this spoof movie was all about. On the peaceful planet Druidia, King Roland attempts to marry his daughter, Princess Vespa, to Prince Valium. But Vespa and her loyal droid Dot Matrix escape during her wedding. After wasting the fresh air on the distant planet Spaceball, the good-for-nothing President Scroob,
how do I know you're not making faces at me under that thing?
orders the arch-villain henchman Dark Helmet to kidnap Princess Vespa to force King Roland to provide them with the code to Druidia's atmosphere. Under those circumstances, the seasoned mercenary Lone Star and his trusty half-human, half-canine sidekick Barf will attempt to save the princess in distress, while at the same time, the ruthless Lone Shark Pizza the Hut is after them. But in the end, only he who can harness the mystical and mighty force known only as the Schwartz will be able to save the day. This movie was absolutely hilarious. I love this one, and you know what? I cannot say enough good things about it. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to start talking about some of the other things that went on in this movie. Now, believe it or not, a lot of spoofs of movies are done, and they don't have to get permission for it. But in a 2013 television interview, shortly before receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award, Mel Brooks stated that he personally obtained George Lucas's full permission to parody any and all things Star Wars related, but on one condition: that absolutely no merchandise of any kind be produced from this movie. This is the reason why all Yogurt and the Dinks do is merchandising.
It's a merchandising where the real money from the movie is made. Spaceballs the flamethrower! The kids love this one. Last but not least, Spaceballs the dog. Me.
May the Schwartz be with you.
It is also why none of the merchandise seen in this movie was ever mass produced or publicly sold in any way. And speaking of paying homage to the original movie that they were parodying, the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars actually makes a cameo appearance in this movie. Now, given a close look at the exterior shot of the space diner, it can be spotted parked there among the other space vehicles. George Lucas got a chance to read the screenplay before production began and loved it so much that he decided to have his special effects company, Industrial Light and Magic, help make this movie. And of course, with all that stuff in mind about the merchandising, of all the jokes in this movie, writer, producer, and director Mel Brooks says that the two he is most proud of are the running gag about merchandising and Colonel Sanders' renting Spaceballs before it was finished. And that scene where Dark Helmet is playing with his dolls, well, that actually really wasn't in the screenplay. Now, writer, producer, and director Mel Brooks came up with the idea on the set one day and told this to Rick Moranis, who then improvised that entire scene. And speaking of ad-lib, John Candy ad-libbed a line, "Oh, that's going to leave a mark," after standing up without undoing his seatbelt. And how about this one? The escape pod launch sequence is an unused clip from Star Wars from 1977, provided to Mel Brooks by Lucasfilm. The real Lucasfilm, the original Lucasfilm, the one that actually cared about product. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I starting to rant again? Burn, Disney, burn. Disco Inferno.
Burn, Disney, burn, it's a mouse house inferno. Burn, Disney, burn our mother down. Burn, Disney, burn, it's a mouse house inferno. Burn, Disney, burn our mother down.
And in a DVD audio commentary for the movie, Mel Brooks jokes that he saved around $1,000 by letting Michael Winslow do most of the sound effects during his scene.
Sir, what is it? Can I talk to you, please, sir?
Well,
Can I talk to you, sir?
you don't need that private. We're right here. Now, what is it?
Can I talk to you, sir?
Now, what is it?
Having trouble with the radar, sir.
What's wrong with it?
Lost the bleeps, lost the sweeps, and I lost the creeps.
What? What? And the what?
No, the bleeps. The sweeps. And the creeps.
And just in case you missed it, President Scrooge's name is an anagram of Mel Brooks, the man who plays him. Think about it. Now, this one may seem a little bit strange to you that have already seen this movie, but a full face mask resembling a wrinkled bulldog was originally constructed for the character of Barf. But Mel Brooks quipped that if they were going to hide John Candy behind a mask, he might as well hire someone else for half the price. A nose and upper lip piece was tried next, which Candy approved, but again, Brooks did not. Finally, they wound up settling on animatronic ears connected to a hairpiece, a small nose application, and a patch over one eye. And the Barf costume was operated by 3 people. John Candy operated Barf's tail using a hidden control in his paw, while 2 assistants each controlled an ear. Candy's costume was powered by a 30-pound battery that he wore on his back. This really takes the notion of carrying your character around on your back a little bit figuratively. And 6 complete dot matrix suits were built for Lorraine Yarnell Jansen to wear, and all of them were used up due to breakage on set. Now for the interior scenes, the feet were outfitted with roller skates, but for the desert exterior, she was given flat-bottom shoes. Dot's face was somewhat inspired by Joan Rivers, who had already been contracted to provide the voice. And with just a mention of those few costumes in mind, according to writer, producer, and director Mel Brooks, this was one of the most expensive movies he had ever made. At $25 million, with Dracula Dead and Loving It in 1995 a close second at $22 million, the cost to produce this one was extremely over top compared to some of his other movies, say The Producers from 1967, which cost less than $1 million to produce. And while most of this movie does spoof Star Wars, it is not the only sci-fi franchise that this one spoofs. It also spoofs Star Trek, believe it or not. The character of Princess Vespa was based on Dolmen Elan, a ruler of the planet Elas, in the original Star Trek episode, Star Trek the original series Elan of Troyes from 1968. Also, there are mentions of a transporter beam malfunction. Now, it is also to be noted that the name Princess Vespa itself is a joke. Vespa is the Italian word for wasp and is also a scooter. In North America, the term WASP, of course, stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And Lone Star says he was born somewhere in the Ford Galaxy. Now, this is a double allusion to a model car produced by the Ford company, the Ford Galaxy 500, and of course, Harrison Ford from the Star Wars movies. And the hidden meanings behind names didn't stop there. Now, the Schwartz is more than just a replacement for the name of the Force. Schwartz is the name of Mel's legal representative for this movie. This gave the phrase, "May the Schwartz be with you," far more significance to the entire production than just a catchphrase for the movie. And during the self-destruct sequence, when the cancel self-abort door is open, the authorized by line at the bottom has the name Albiez. Peter Albiez was one of the special effects staff. When initiating the metamorphosis of Spaceball 1 into the giant maid, Dark Helmet leans towards Colonel Sanders and asks, "Ready, Kafka?" This is a reference to the novella Die Wanderung by Austrian-Hungarian author Franz Kafka, a story about a man who transforms into a giant insect. And swinging back around to what we were talking about earlier, about other sci-fi movies that he actually spoofed while making Spaceballs. One of the other ones was Alien.
Not again.
Sir John Hurt claimed that Mel Brooks actually talked him into self-parodying his role from Alien 1979 by making it sound like it would be a brief walk-on cameo. Only when Hurt came to the set did he realize that the entire scene was an elaborate spoof of the chestburster scene from Alien. And the alien that pops out of Sir John Hurt's chest and starts singing "Hello My Baby" and dancing with the hat and cane is a parody of Michigan J. Frog from Looney Tunes. And leave it to George. George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic constructed the puppet of the chestburster for the movie. Now, there was actually quite a few other actors that were considered for the role of Lone Star. Among those were Tom Cruise, Tom Hanks, and Mel Brooks' original choice, James Caan. Unfortunately, he was struggling with addiction issues at the time, and then an unknown Bill Pullman won the role. The scene where Mega Maid sucks the atmosphere off the mountain on the planet Druidia is a parody of the Paramount Studios logo. Now, of course, every time Dark Helmet has his face covered, his voice is lower and more basal, similar to James Earl Jones when he played Darth Vader. He also speaks with an African accent. In the DVD commentary, Mel Brooks says that the idea of Dark Helmet's voice changing whenever his face was covered was actually Rick Moranis' idea. Curiously, Moranis' Dark Helmet voice bears resemblance to the actor and stuntman David Prowse's actual voice, who physically portrayed Darth Vader in the original Star Wars trilogy. And contrary to rumor, it is not an uncredited Michael York playing an ape in the one scene, because in a 2016 talk at the National Press Club, York said he has unsuccessfully tried to get the credit off his online resumes, but has since given up on it. Now, this is one that you may not know. Now, the filmmakers had to replace the original title of this movie, Planet Moron, when they heard about the British science fiction spoof Morons from Outer Space in 1985. Mel Brooks, Ronnie Graham, and Thomas Meehan went through all of the letters of the alphabet to search for a word to add to space, which Thomas Meehan suggested. Mel Brooks spilled a drink and shouted, "Balls!" And Ronnie Graham said Spaceballs, which became the movie's new and final title. And some of you may find this interesting. Tesla Motors has used Spaceballs, Starship Speeds, Light Speed, Ridiculous Speed, Ludicrous Speed, and Plaid Speed as inspiration for naming their acceleration modes, because apparently Elon Musk is a huge Spaceballs fan.
They've gone to plaid.
Now, some of you may or may not have actually caught this one. Maybe you're just too young to remember these commercials. But when President Scrooge meets Charlene and Marlene the Gallup twins, he orders them to chew their gum. This is a direct reference to the Doublemint television commercials featuring twins. So, after King Roland gives the combination to the air shield of the planet Druidia and the light goes out and on again, the doctor is seen making out with the nurse. Dark Helmet then orders him to go to the golf course and work on his putts. This is a pun, as putts in Hebrew and Yiddish is slang for penis. And originally, Steve Martin was considered for the role of Colonel Sanders. So in Spaceballs, the book novelization by R.L. Stine, he reveals the names of the dinks: Rinky Dink, Blinky Dink, Stinky Dink, Pinky Dink, Finky Dink, and Winky Dink. Speaking of dinks, one of the dinks was played by Tony Cox, who also played an Ewok in Star Wars Episode 6, The Return of the Jedi in 1983. And of course, a lot of the younger people are not going to know this one. So the name dot matrix was taken from a type of computer printer which was very popular with personal computers in the 1970s and 1980s. This was prior to the invention of inkjet and laser printers. And as we stated earlier, no merchandise could actually be made for consumers. However, they did make fall merchandise for this movie, some of which they actually did label swapping. Now, if you hear me talk about my toys from the past videos, you will hear me mention label swapping quite a bit. They actually did that for the movie here. If you look closely, you will see that the coloring book for Spaceballs, the coloring book is actually a Transformers book. Optimus Prime can actually be seen on the cover. Now, here is a strange one for all of you. Now, this movie, in a way, predicted Disney buying Lucasfilm Limited, the company, of course, behind the making of the Star Wars film franchise, which this movie parodied. When the Dinks find and rescue Lone Star, Princess Vespa, Barf, and Dot Matrix in the desert, Lone Star says, When did we get to Disneyland? And while we're on the subject of Disney, I have stated many times how I can't stand Disney and how they like to pilfer and steal and rob from other companies and franchises, books and stories. And while this idea has actually been taken from a few different sources, one of the ones it was first used was in Spaceballs. Now, the planet Druidia, being surrounded by a planet-enclosing shield, was basically the same concept that Disney wound up reusing when they did Rogue One. Now, if you have ever seen this movie, or whether you're hearing about it for the first time, one of the most hysterical lines in the movie is between Darth Helmet and Lone Star. Lone Star being a cross between Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, just for a little bit of back reference in case you've never seen this. Dark Helmet says to him,
I am your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate.
What's that make us?
Absolutely nothing.
This is actually a play from a quote from Conan the Destroyer in 1984 with the line, "My brother's sister's cousin never said anything about bars." And of course, when Lone Star attempts to incapacitate a guard while heading toward the self-destruct room, he attempts the Vulcan nerve pinch. Another reference to the Star Trek universe. In the scene where the princess shoots at the troopers who shot her hair appears to be a nod to a Carrie Fisher scene in The Blues Brothers. And as always, my friends, we are going to get to some of the goofs of this movie. Now, the first one is Lone Star and Barf. And although Dark Helmet throws Lone Star's Schwartz ring down a grating, Lone Star is still wearing it in Winnebago after the Mega Maid explodes. When Princess Vespa is threatened with plastic surgery, the nurse zips up her shirt. But in a subsequent shot, her shirt is still unzipped. Another scene has Lone Star spraying shaving cream in the guard's face, and then he gives him the Vulcan nerve pinch to knock him out. As the guard falls, he knocks Lone Star's ring off his finger. In the next shot, Lone Star has the ring on again. And when Dark Helmet goes flying forward after the ship comes to a screaming halt, you can see the intercom microphone still suspended in midair with a wire holding it up. And whenever Pizza the Hut speaks, the chin of the person in the costume can be seen where Pizza's tongue is supposed to be. And in a close-up shot during the desert scene, the camera team can be seen reflected back in the black helmet of one of the troopers.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Very good, sir.
Smoke if you got 'em.
Are we being too literal?
No, you fool. We're following orders. We were told to comb the desert, so we're combing it.
Now fuck all this. Ludicrous speed. Go!
Sir?
What?
What about you guys? We ain't found.
Why didn't somebody tell me my ass was so big?
Are you all right, sir?
Fine. How have you been?
Fine, sir.
Good.
Not again!
And I see your Schwartz is as big as mine.
Anyway, guys, that's all I have on this one. Do you remember this movie? Have you seen this movie? Are you planning to watch this movie if you haven't? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, as always, my friends, I am oh so thankful that you decided to show up here and watch this video with me. I am most appreciative. And if you enjoyed what you've seen and what you heard, go ahead and destroy that like button for me. And if you are new to the channel, welcome. I am glad that you are here. I hope that you will consider watching some of my other videos, and if you like what you've seen and you like what you have heard, that you will consider subscribing to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And remember, never let anybody tell you what to do, because your silence gives consent. Anyway, guys, I will catch you all next time. Later, y'all.